All you.
Good evening, everyone. This is the May 10th Board of Selectmen's meeting, and the first item of business on the agenda this evening is the reorganization of the board. It's my honor to receive any motion for the nomination of chairman of the board, or chair of the Board of Selectmen.
Mr. Mizikar, I'd like to nominate Maurice DiPaolo for chairperson of the Board of Selectmen.
All right, it's been a nomination for Mr. DiPaolo. Is there a second?
Second.
All right, it's been one nomination. Are there any other nominations? All right, hearing none, we'll move to a vote to install Mr. DiPaolo as the chair of the Board of Selectmen.
All in favor?
I guess we have a,
All those in favor?
yeah. Do we need a second motion, or?
No, we seconded it. I think you just
Okay.
have to say all in favor.
All right, all those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Hearing none. Please take it over. I agree.
It was different. Good evening. We'll continue with the reorganization of the board. Would somebody like to make a nomination for our vice chair of the board?
Mr. DiPaolo, I move that Beth Cassavant be vice chairperson for the coming year.
Okay, thank you. Do we have a second?
Second.
Any further discussion? No? There being none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? So voted. Congratulations. And next we have the clerk of the board. Would somebody like to make a nomination for the clerk of the Board of Selectmen?
Mr. Chairman, I nominate Teresa Flynn to serve as clerk of the Board of Selectmen.
Okay, do we have a second?
Second.
Second? Okay. Is there any other discussion? Okay. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? So voted. Congratulations. She gets her little clerk thing. She can't keep it, Joe. Okay. Thank you. Before we get going, I would just like to congratulate Mr. Samia for being reelected to the board, and want to thank you for all of your hard work the past year. It's been an interesting couple of years. This year was no exception, and I know you put a lot of work into it, and we appreciate all the effort that you had. So you get to relax for a little bit, but not too much.
Thank you.
And then, Ms. Conlon, congratulations.
Thank you.
Eventually you get one of these that looks real. But welcome to the board. The board succeeds when everybody succeeds, so if you need any help from any of us, and particularly myself, I'm available whenever.
Thank you.
I'll give you more information than you want. So, but seriously, we'd like you to, we want you to succeed. And there is a little bit of a learning curve, and we're more than willing to help, so. Anyways, okay, so I guess the next thing is to approve the bills, payrolls, and warrants.
So moved?
Second.
Second? Okay, we have a motion and a second. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? So voted. Announcements. Do we have a notebook yet? Didn't we have a note for the chair? No? I guess not. I thought we did. Okay. Well, I know we have at least one announcement. Pre-town meeting is May 19th at 6 p.m. at Yoke Middle School. There's a lot of information in there's a lot of articles on the warrant, so and a lot of new town meeting members. So I would encourage everybody who can attend to attend to get some background information on all of these. And just about every town meeting member, except I think for some people in Precinct 3, need to get sworn in because of the redistricting. So on May 19th, the same time as the pre-town meeting, the town clerk will be swearing people in at 5:30, 5:45, and 6 p.m. And if you can't make it on one of those times or on the 19th at all, contact the town clerk and she can swear you in. Otherwise, I'm sure there'll be some swearings in on the annual town meeting for people who missed it. I don't have anything else this
Mr.
evening.
Chairman,
Yes,
if you'd like, I will support you in my role as vice chair by reading some of the other announcements.
sure,
Perfect. Or I can hand you this and you can read them.
you can do it.
Okay, so the ARPA Small Business and Nonprofit Grant Program is on the announcements. The Planning Department is excited to open a second round of funding for Shrewsbury Small Business and Nonprofit Grant Program. Grants of up to $2,500 will be awarded to eligible local small businesses and nonprofits to assist in the recovery from the unique challenges that were created by the COVID-19 pandemic. Recent awardees include Thomas Auto Parts, Little Beginnings, I Craze Frozen Yogurt, Jump Nation, Shrewsbury Country Shop, and Tri-M Dental Equipment Repair. Your business could be next. Don't wait. Apply now for the chance to receive $25 at the Planning and Economic Development page on the town's website, shrewsburyma.gov, to fill out the application and get more information. The second announcement is that the Memorial Day Parade will be in person this year, along with the ceremony, and it's planned for Monday, May 30th, 2022. The parade forms at 9 a.m. at the Shrewsbury Town Hall, and the parade kicks off at 9:30. The parade marches to the center of town for the Memorial Day address, which will be Gold Star mother Tracy Rasheen. Her son was Army PFC Brian Moquin, who died while serving during Operation Enduring Freedom in 2006. John Travers from the American Legion Raystone Post will be serving as the Master of Ceremonies. The parade will continue for a wreath-laying ceremony at Mountain View Cemetery on Boylston Street. All veterans and active military personnel are welcome to march in the parade. And then finally, the additional boat ramp attendants are needed. Parks and Recreation is seeking additional boat ramp attendants to work at Lake Quinsigamond and Flint Pond this summer. Part-time hours begin Memorial Day weekend through Labor Day weekend. Pay starts at $19 per hour. Please see the job details under Employment Opportunities on the town website. Done. You're welcome.
I apparently skipped over item 3. Could we have a motion to approve the minutes of April 12th and April 26th?
So moved.
Second.
Okay, we have motion second. Any further discussion? There being none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, so voted. Okay, next, town manager's report. Mr. Miskar.
Good evening. I want to first and foremost address some of the challenges that we're having with yard waste collections. We've been working diligently with our contractor Waste Management, but unfortunately they don't have staffing sufficient to perform yard waste in the communities that they operate in. They have prioritized their resources that they have available to ensure that general trash and recycling is collected, and that will continue, and we don't foresee any issues with that. Unfortunately, because of uncertainty in their staffing levels and inconsistency that we've experienced with them over the past few weeks, we have just put a indefinite postponement on the collection. I do want to give members of the town 3 assurances. We certainly don't take this lightly, and it is embarrassing, and we're disappointed that we're not able to provide the services that we expect at the level that we expect and what we've contracted for. And therefore, we will ensure that all obligations and actions that are available to the town under the contract will be enforced to the best interest of the town, and we're reviewing that with council and developing paths forward with regards to the contract as we speak. And we are also working on alternatives with other ways to collect the materials, including town staff and other contractors and companies. We have extended drop-off availability through June 3rd at 211 South Street. I'm sorry to have to ask residents to do this, but it's our best option at this point. We have several dumpsters down there that you can put materials in. And those are available weekdays, 7:30 a.m. through 3 p.m. And we do have Thursday evening hours until 7 p.m. this week. So we're trying to provide as much opportunity as we can. Again, sorry for the inconvenience that this caused, but we're actively working to remedy the solution. Beyond that, just a couple updates for everyone. The town has been granted a Housing Choice Community designation. So the board authorized and submitted an application for a Housing Choice Community earlier this year. And with Housing Choice Community designation comes the availability of new funding and additional grant points. Housing Choice Community designation, as we explained at the time of the application, does not compel the town to produce additional housing. However, it recognizes our accomplishments in the production of housing over the last several years. And with that recognition comes additional benefits that we will seek and take greatest advantage of and work with the Affordable Housing Trust and other leaders in the community to use those as best we can. So we're very proud of that accomplishment, and thanks to staff that have worked on that application. I also want to recognize Chief Jim Vona, Fire Chief Jim Vona. He will be installed as the president of the Massachusetts Fire Chiefs Association next Wednesday. So it's a great honor and accomplishment for Chief Vona, and we're very proud of that accomplishment and look forward to his ceremony, which will actually be held here in town with the Fire Chiefs Association. So congratulations to him. Those are all the updates I have this evening.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
could I just ask a quick question of the manager? Going back to yard waste, is there any possibility that there could be a Saturday drop-off for yard waste?
Yeah, we will work to get some staff in place to be able to do that, yes.
Thank you.
I don't know that it'll be this Saturday, but we will try to coordinate resources within this weekend or next weekend to do so.
Great, thanks so much.
You're welcome.
Okay. Mr. Mizuka, do you have anything to report?
Oh, sure. Yeah, I can do COVID update, thank you. So as we've reported for the past, since the beginning of April, we just have weekly numbers. There were an additional 137 COVID cases in the community for the week ended May 6th. So that is a continued slight increase in the total number of cases. So obviously, the numbers continue to rise steadily, and we just ask everyone to be diligent about that. We do continue to report those cases out on a weekly basis, and we send those out through news flashes that you can sign up for on the website. With those 137 cases, it brings the total cases in the community to 7,824.
Okay, thank you. Is that it?
That's it.
Okay, next item on the agenda is a legislative update from Senator Moore and Representative Kane. If you'd like to come up, good evening.
Good evening.
Nice to have you here. Thank you for coming in.
Sit next to me, you want the space?
If I can squeeze in here. Good evening.
Thank you for having us, and I echo the congratulations, Mo, on becoming chair again for the 4,000th time in the history of Shrewsbury. Beth and Teresa, and congratulations, John, on your reelection, and Michelle on your election. Thank you for serving in this capacity. And I was very sorry not to be here 2 weeks ago for John LeBeau's last day, but the House was debating the budget that day. But I understand from Mr. LeBeau that my husband and my sidekick did a good job presenting him with a citation. So, but just want to acknowledge his tremendous service to the town of Shrewsbury and thank him for that. And as always, I remain very grateful for the partnership that we have with Senator Moore and his office, as well as with the town. It's really just a terrific relationship, and I think it is exemplified at all levels of town government, from the Selectmen, School Committee, Finance Committee, into the town manager's office and all the boards and commissions. So thank you for being such great partners to work with. And we also work in other capacities with the town manager. He's been a key part of the local public health campaign across the state, and Ms. Lass also serves as the public sector co-chair for the 495 Metro West Partnership, and I have the privilege of working with her on that, as well as school committee, Jason Pellich, who's the executive director. So I wanted to just update briefly on a change in my office. My legislative aide, Anna Darrow, who had been with me over 2 years, has taken a new role, and Sophia Flionis, who's a Shrewsbury High School graduate and will be graduating in another week from Fairfield University, has been joined my office in January, has been working remotely, and will finally, fortunately, be with us in the State House in just a few weeks. But I'm happy to have her on board, and certainly she knows Shrewsbury well. And the State House is finally open as well, which is nice, although we can't have events there yet. It's nice to be back in the building and to see people and to have people be able to come in and meet with us and express their concerns in person, which was a long time coming. Why don't I pause here and see if you want to share anything?
No, okay, thank you. It's nice to see everyone again, and again, congratulations, John, congratulations, Michelle. And Mo, on how many times have you been chairman now?
I think 6.
6? Okay. Congratulations.
Something like that, I don't know. Doesn't make that much difference.
Going back over a long history, I can remember all the times that being here that we've had poor budgetary news, and over the years it's consistently gotten better and better. And I think the work between the House and the Senate trying to address a lot of the needs with the community, from student aid, from local aid to unrestricted government aid and other types of state finances or resources. I think hopefully you'll agree that we've made a lot of successes with everyone working together. And again, as Representative Kane mentioned, it's working with local officials. Without your input, we wouldn't be able to advocate on the state level for the resources that you need. So I guess I'll turn it back to Representative Kane so she can go over the great House news in the budget.
Sure. And I would just, before I do that, mention that, as you know, we did have to do, as we did on the town level for the redistricting at the precinct level and the sizing, we did that as a state level as well. Number one priority for me was keeping Shrewsbury whole, which I'm very pleased has been. Unfortunately, I had to lose one of my precincts that I had in Westboro because of the growth in the community, couldn't keep it within the size limit. But I am pleased that Senator Moore will be picking up Westboro as part of his district after the coming year. Westboro will be very well served by his leadership as well, and certainly our offices enjoy a close working relationship, so I'm pleased about that. As Senator Moore said, there's a lot of money around Beacon Hill right now, federal money that has come down through, as well as tax revenue, which has been performing above benchmarks significantly. The good news on that is we're going to have probably over $6 billion in our rainy day fund at the end of this fiscal year on a state level. If you'll recall, almost 8 years ago when the Baker-Polito administration took over, we were not even at $1 billion, I don't think. It's been a tremendous amount that we've been able to sock away despite having 2 challenging years with COVID. In the House budget that was just approved, very happy that, as Senator Moore said, increases have kept up as committed to. UGGA, the local aid, grew at 2.7%, although when you see the number from Shrewsbury, it doesn't feel like 2.7% at 82,000. But education funding as well. The governor's budget came out with what is mandated by law now at $30 minimum aid per pupil. The House and the Senate have increased that to $60 per pupil. So that means that Shrewsbury will be receiving an increase of $360,000 over fiscal year 22 numbers. And that is fully funding 2/6 of the goal of the increases in the Student Opportunity Act, which means we're on target to continue that funding schedule. There was also a fairly significant increase in the special education circuit breaker funding, and charter school funding is being fully funded in this budget that we have here. Locally, in the House budget, we were able to get $50,000 for Shrewsbury Youth and Family Services to continue their youth mental health first aid training, which has been a priority for us. One thing notably missing from the budget were any tax relief or tax cuts, and I'm certainly hopeful, especially given how much revenue we're going to be above benchmarks right now, that the the tax relief that was put forward by the governor in a bill can be something that we can take up. It does, I think the Senate has certainly been more vocal about indicating a willingness to do so, but the House seems to be in agreement as well. So I'm hopeful before the end of our formal sessions on July 31st that there will be tax relief. And much of what has been filed is also geared towards lower to middle income families. And so hopefully that is something that we'll be able to move ahead with. Turn it back to you.
My turn.
Sure. Go
Thank
for
you. Thanks. So as Representative Kane stated, I think if the House and the Senate from local aid on Chapter 70 are both allocating the same amount of money. The only difference between the House and Senate as far as that aspect goes is for the UGR money, the unrestricted government aid. The Senate is actually proposing $80,000 more than what the House did in their budget for local aid for Shrewsbury, as far as the unrestricted government aid. We are also $435 million for special education circuit breaker, which is $61 million over fiscal year 22, $243 million for charter school reimbursement, which is an increase of $89 million over fiscal year 22. We have $82 million for regional school transportation, which is providing roughly 85% reimbursement. And we have $55 million for adult basic education services, and which is an increase of $5 million over fiscal year 22. We have $6 million for a social emotional learning grant program, which includes $1 million for universal mental health screenings in schools. And we have $5 million for a transfer to the 21st Century Education Trust Fund, and another $1.5 million for a transfer to the Genocide Education Trust Fund. And we also have $400,000 that is going to a hate crime grant program for school districts that have identified any issues of dealing with anti-Semitism or any other type of discriminatory conduct in the school system. The Senate also is proposing $19 million for early college and dual enrollment programs, which would allow 7,500 students to participate in the program. And as we were talking to Superintendent Sawyer earlier, one of the local schools, universities, I should say colleges in the area, Quinn Sigmund Community College is an active member and has a very successful program. So I know he was talking to us before this meeting about maybe trying to work out, or reaching out to them to establish a relationship. Then we have $4.8 million for innovation pathways and $2.5 million for career technical education supports. And as you know, Representative Kane
Love it when you call me that.
just mentioned the budget amendment that she obtained in the House, and this is where having a good relationship and we can work on these issues together. That allows me to seek another funding opportunity in the Senate. So I am going to be filing an amendment tomorrow, trying to get $69,000 for your new voting machines. So.
I would just add the last few months, we've seen some additional funding coming to the town, and certainly it was called the Winter Recovery Assistance Program, but we called it the pothole money, an additional $500,000 that's coming to Shrewsbury. I know the Chapter 90 money, you're scheduled to get $989,227. It's still in the Senate. I would anticipate the Senate is taking it up soon after
Hopefully.
budget, and that money will be coming in. And we still have a substantial portion of ARPA money left to designate, and the Baker-Polito administration did just file a forward economic development bill, which also has several local earmarks in it for Shrewsbury, and so certainly we'll be doing whatever we can. The hearing for that bill was yesterday, and so hopefully it will be reported out and is something that we can take up in the short term. Finally, I would note that the bill that we have filed for the housing here many times was once again sent to study by the Housing Committee, which really is not indicative of it being a Shrewsbury bill. It's indicative of the Housing Committee not taking up the broader issue, which many communities have asked them to take a look at in terms of how to classify the manufactured homes towards our housing stock numbers. Happy to answer.
Okay, I was just gonna, quickly, one other thing, tax cuts. So as Representative Kane talked about, that the Senate and the House have been talking about it. So we were told that we are going to try to be doing something hopefully before we break July 31st, looking at some sort of tax cut package. Along the lines of our rainy day fund, which is currently at $6.74 billion, which is roughly about 6% of the state budget. Once that fund hits 8%, it is mandated that we have to provide some sort of tax relief. So if the economy and revenues continue at the growth it's going at, whether we do tax cut or not this year or not, we may be forced next year to have to give the taxpayers some of their money back.
One final thing I would add, we continue to work on the Route 20 corridor in terms of advocating for the advancement of the traffic and safety improvements, and certainly the first project that has been identified there. A year ago, or 2 years ago, it was probably a $15.4 million project. I'm not sure what it's going to be pegged at today, but really stretches from the area of South Street to Valente Drive, and making improvements there is something that we, along with Congressman McGovern, have been working on very diligently.
Thank you. Anybody have any questions? I have the unemployment trust fund, I think that's what you call it, right? Mm-hmm. What's the status of that, right? Funding for that was or the balance was really low, right? For a while, is that back to normal?
Well, the requirement to refund it was higher because of all the money that was used sort of during the pandemic. The first round of ARPA funding did pay $500 million into that. There's still, and I don't know that the state has gotten the final sign-off from the feds. They were still, what the proper number was that it needed to be funded at was still being discussed. But that certainly has been one of the things that some of us have advocated for some of the remaining ARPA funds to be used for, because again, it was through no fault of businesses in terms of what happened under COVID. And so, especially while the state has excess revenue, we are hopeful that that would be written down to an extent that it doesn't end up on the backs of small businesses. So I don't know what the precise number is at the moment. Certainly can find that out for you.
No, that's okay. I know if the state isn't able to make it up, that the businesses are going to have to make it up, right?
I know initially the long-term projection, well, I should say that the initial projections were that we were roughly anywhere from $5 to $6 billion in deficit for that trust fund. But the last accounting that we had from the Baker Fleet administration, we actually had a surplus at that time. And the administration also did, during the rush of the pandemic, hundreds of state employees were hired to work for the Department of Unemployment, and there were mistakes made, both on people calling in and requesting unemployment, and also just the inputting of data. The administration did. There was a lot of discussion as far as clawbacks, about going back after the funds that people may have received in excess of what they should have. But the administration, and there's been no rejection from the House or the Senate hasn't opposed it, about we are not right now at this time seeking any sort of clawback from individuals who may have received more than what they should have, just due to the nature and the amount of calls and what went on at that time.
So the budget now, conference committee? Are we
The
there
Senate
yet?
hasn't. The House, we're done with ours. The Senate just released theirs today, and they'll have amendments filed, and then you debate it in, 2 weeks?
Yeah, we start, actually, the amendments are being filed from 1 o'clock today until noontime Friday, and then we'll go into debate on Tuesday, the 24th. And we'll hopefully have it done by Friday or Thursday night.
You think we'll have a budget by June 30th?
I was gonna say, I hope so. A lot of the major issues, I think,
Yeah.
have been addressed. The only two big issues I know of, one, the House authorized or recommended $100 million or $110 million for the universal food program. The Senate didn't, but then the House appropriated $60 million for the rate reserve for our early education workers. The Senate proposed 25, but the Senate also proposed $250 million for grant programs for those providers, which the House does and did not. So I know those are two issues that could be, will be subject of the conference committee.
I think, honestly, there's so many other things that needs to be worked on that I suspect, it's probably going to be pretty quick, but I could be wrong. We have a hard stop of July 31st, and we have thousands of things that we probably could do between now and then. So hopefully it will be a pretty quick. But the current chairs of Ways and Means and both have been pretty good about negotiating in good faith and as quickly as possible.
Mr. Muscat, do you have any questions?
Anything specific?
No, thank you. Anyone else? Ms.
One.
Cassavant?
So when you spoke about the education funding being increased to $60 per pupil, is that for this year only?
Yes. When we did the Student Opportunity Act a few years ago, it was put into statute that it's a minimum of 30 for districts that are already receiving the aid level that makes them only eligible for that and not, both branches at the time said in years when, tax revenue is higher, that they would seek to go, over and above that. And so this is an example of that. But yes, it's only for this 1 year.
Thank you, and thank you for all of your advocacy on Beacon Hill on behalf of the town of Shrewsbury and the communities that you both serve. We're very grateful for the working relationship and all that you both do.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Anyone else? I'd like to also say that we appreciate the work that the two of you do, especially the two of you do together. I don't know many other districts and how they work, but I think you two have really worked closely, genuinely worked closely for the entire time that you were together, and it helps us, and we appreciate it because you can get things done that way.
Thank you.
So thank you for the good work you're doing. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank
It's
you.
been a pleasure working with Representative Kane. Thank you.
Yep. Great. Okay. Great. Thank you for coming in.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Do I say something nice and you hit me?
Okay. The next item of business is a joint meeting with the school committee to review a presentation on the space needs study by Lamoureux Pagano Associates. And to review the fiscal and operational matters in accordance with the March 16th, 2021 override framework. So how are we going to proceed? Ms. Crockett going to?
Starting?
Okay.
Yeah, so Katie Crockett with LPAA will be leading us through the Space Needs Study. And just a reminder to everyone, the Space Needs Study is a forward-looking document that attempts to fill the next phase of capital improvements across our school district and school facilities. The last time that we conducted such a study was in 1997, and of course it served us very well with all the projects across the school district, both small and large, whether they were accelerated repair or similar programs or major projects like Sherwood and Beale. And this project funding is being funded through the Beale total debt exclusion and being overseen by the Beale Early Childhood Building Committee. And this work will continue throughout the summer, so this is kind of like a mid-project-ish update. So I'll turn it over to Katie. Thanks for coming.
Thank you. Thank you so much. This update it goes back to, I know Patrick Collins still has this at his desk, 1997 study that was done of all the facilities, whole variety of options that were developed and selected, probably by some of the elected officials here today. And it's run its course. It's well, I think it was designed for 20 years, and we're at 25 right now. So it's our honor to be taking that torch up again. I love to put in this personal piece about my role in the firm when we were doing this, which was as an intern architect. And honestly, it's been a fabulous experience watching this come to fruition, and watching the evolution of the town, the pedagogy, always top shelf, as I've said many, many times. But, and you'll see some of that as we run through this today. I want to acknowledge our working group, which has been excellent, our steering committee, headed by Kevin Mizikar, Superintendent Joe Sawyer, Pat Collins, and Keith Baldinger, all here tonight. So we've met a few times during these extremely busy times to try to get this all launched. And so they have been with us the whole way, which is terrific. The study is taking a view of all of the existing schools, starting with Parker Road preschool, all the way through up to the high school. And we are including a portion about the administration. The administration offices are being studied under really a different contract, but we're going to include this in here for the planning purposes of the whole school committee, which completely makes sense, of course. The charge that we have received is that we're going to keep the grade configuration the way it is. This has been kind of a long road to get here, starting with the high school for 9 to 12, the middle school, the 5 to 8, and then a K to 4 elementary level with an interesting posit of where we're going to fit in preschool within that elementary level. So that's one thing that we see as some opportunities as the options develop for this. The components of the study are what you see here. We have been looking at the existing conditions of all of these buildings that we have. That is complete. We've had engineers come through. We've met with Mr. Ballinger about what improvements have been done to the school. The enrollment projections have been complete. We're going to talk about that a little bit tonight. So those are looking ahead to 2031 32, which will be here, I can tell you, in a snap. But that is a 10-year look ahead. We've been working on the program and are going to complete that this spring. So that's some of the things. We have a district leaders meeting tomorrow, which we're looking forward to, where we'll get some more refinement on that. But the base of the program really is what the Massachusetts School Building Authority reimburses for. That's what we're using as our spine for this, and I'll talk a little bit about that. Once we have all that information, we can start to look at the options, and we're going to do that this summer. And we'll have meetings with our steering committee, obviously, as things evolve. And then we are going to work towards pulling together our final recommendations this fall. And we certainly anticipate other public presentations to explain to you what we've got. So that's the overall structure of the study itself. So as Mr. Mizikar said, this is an interim update for you. We don't have any of the sizzle to talk to you about tonight. So I thought I would just flip through some of the pieces that we've been pulling together. So we've been looking at each school. As I said, of course, this is Parker Road, which is a kind of unique instance in that it is sharing other municipal facilities on that site. And it does have some nice ball fields, and the pre-K is primarily housed there at this time. It did have an HVAC replacement, in 2020 and currently has air conditioning. And that is another objective of the study, to be able to have full air conditioning in all of the facilities. And of course, that's important in terms of an inclusion program, which Shrewsbury really is championing here, and also to extend the use of the building for full year. The images that we show here are some of the shared facilities that we have, some nice bright classrooms and facilities, but it's a bit of a challenging location. I think there's probably no argument about that. These diagrams, I'm going to flip through for every one of these schools. They are basically floor plans that show the uses of each of the spaces within the school. And these, again, are with categories. These at the bottom here is the key that MSBA uses for developing their space allocation for each project. This diagram shows the spaces at Parker Road as they compare to what MSBA has within their chart. So anything in red is greater than 10% smaller than what is recommended. Everything that's in blue is 10% above, and gray is in the middle of the road. It meets expectations. So this is going to be important for us as we develop that next phase in terms of it's not just the scale of the school, but it's what the spaces are that are in there and how they might be modified. So I have a whole series of these for every one of the buildings, so I'm going to flip through. This is Beale, the newest project. Of course, absolutely amazing site that the town was able to procure. And I will say one of the great things about this project was having a site that was unoccupied, where we could develop such a large school without disrupting an existing one. That was a huge advantage to this particular project. And I hope that some of these images are familiar to you as the most recent project. And this is, again, that diagram showing the MSBA spaces, and the core facilities are these in this area with the academic wings, and you can see the common rooms and the structure of the neighborhoods that were developed for Beale as they show up here. Unfortunately, in the red, blue, gray scheme, there's only a few red spots, and that's really because we shaved storage and some things that were ancillary, honestly. So it's either meets or exceeds MSBA's requirements, as you might hope. That brings us to Calvin Coolidge, which is a school that is in an interesting location at the west side of the community, as you're aware, anchoring that side near Jordan Pond, about a 3-acre site with some town land surrounding it that has other purposes. And it's built in 1927 with several additions following that, including some modular classrooms. And there have been improvements to the school. It does have an elevator. And here you can see the modulars. There's even been additional capital improvements to the modulars over time. We would characterize this as a somewhat convoluted circulation path. As in this school, it's a 3-story academic section, and the core facilities kind of spin off of that, which you can see a little bit in this plan with the 3-story part over here. And this is our red and blue and gray diagram here. So these are striking, and they kind of help us to start visualizing things. May not be surprising to people here, but many of the classrooms are undersized. Some of the core facilities, as we call them, that's your cafeteria, your gym, your media center, are in decent shape in terms of scale. Floral Street was opened in 1997, So it's 25 years, which is terribly hard to believe. A great site of almost 40 acres, but is bisected. And the green that you can see here is wetlands. So that's a kind of a no-build zone. So when you see that on these site plans, it really shrinks how much of developable property we have there. And this, of course, is anchoring on the southern eastern part for the K-4 grade levels. It has a fabulous storage room, one of the best. That's what's on the lower left, which is, of course, at a premium in all of these facilities, and it is important. Interesting to see at this time the cubbies were designed out in the corridor. Sometimes building inspectors aren't that excited about that these days. So things do change. We have carpet in the floors for acoustics. What we don't see here, which is kind of interesting, again, talking about the evolution of the pedagogy, is the common room hadn't really evolved in the whole lexicon of what we're up to. So we do have, you see some familiarity with the wings. We're already breaking the school down into these neighborhoods. And again, the core facilities are positioned for community use. And another interesting thing relative to curriculum is we were pretty excited in designing the school to have what's shown in red here, which were these clusters of special education spaces, and that we had one dedicated for every wing. And that was very progressive at that time. Now, that, compared to, for example, what we developed into Beal to support the inclusion program and some of the substantially separate programs, is hugely different. It's actually a deficit here when we take a look at it. Size of spaces is pretty good. Spring Street is another interesting one. I know beloved in town, up in the northern eastern part of the town. This site is deceiving when you look at a site plan because it slopes greatly in the back. So what you see as developable is about, as already developed is about what it is. It's challenging to build outside of that. This also has a number of additions. This is, I believe, a 1960s era building, but has portable classrooms, 6 actually, significant number of them. And some of the additions, as you can see in the image on the lower right, were not designed with accessibility in mind at that time. And so there are many level changes in this school which are challenging. This has had a new roof, new windows, and a new HVAC system with full air conditioning. And so here you see the gray in that band are the 6 modulars. So you can kind of see the scale of how many academic spaces those are providing here. Of note as well is that the gym is really, really small in this school. So the administration is near the entrance, but visibility to it is challenging. That's another issue that we look at carefully now, is security, and some of those pieces are very challenging for these schools. So Patton is right in the center of town, as I'm sure most of you know, on 1.5 acres, and again, it's encumbered by this green patch that you see. So some of that is not very developable, and the topography changes as you go towards Grafton Street as well. So what is there has been well designed and well used for area. It does have some modular classrooms. It has what we've always joyfully called the triple threat. It has one space that's used as a cafeteria, a gym, and assembly. So that's super challenging for any administrator or teachers to do all that you do these days. And here's the floor plan. The purple was the triple threat. And we see that's seriously undersized. Many of the classrooms are good. And they're kind of what you call that classic double-loaded corridor. You have classrooms on either side of a corridor, very efficient design. And now we get into the middle school sector. Of course, we have the campus of middle schools right in the center of town, starting with Sherwood, and they share basically a 50-acre site that's fairly well developed. We have starting to see some of the sustainable design initiatives. This is a highly efficient building envelope, and for those of you who aren't aware, the black wall at the gym is actually a passive solar device. It allows warm air to rise and then by fans be circulated in the gym, which doesn't help in the summer if it's hot. And this was not fully air conditioned. We do have the common rooms, again, that the neighborhoods that you are so accustomed to seeing. Here we were able to really nest the entry with an administration area well to control flow when school is in session. And the deficits here are kind of interesting to think about, because when we first designed the building, we deliberately cut it back as much as we could at the time to make this an economical plan for the town. I think there's some people who, had they been able to look in a crystal ball and realize the economy at that time, might have hoped for other things, but it's an extremely efficient building, and it's very carefully planned in that regard. So Oak Middle School, of course, was the former high school, built in 1957, an auspicious year, I will say. And had an addition in 1981, a major renovation in 2004, and is up for window replacement, which is great, because in that renovation we kind of did a Band-Aid approach, I would say. So it was a conversion of the high school to a middle school, distributing science rooms, kind of trying to break up that departmental arrangement that it had originally. And awesome gym and auditorium for a middle school size that we've been able to capitalize. Interesting to hear about continual town meetings and groupings at that place, because it's got air conditioning. And here you see some more issues in terms, which is not surprising. Whenever you have a renovation project, you're trying to do the best with what you have without reconfiguring it completely. And so this is definitely evidence of that. Science rooms in particular have changed tremendously all along. Now they expect a science room to have almost 1,500 square feet, where we've had 1,000 and 1,200. So in order to meet MSBA guidelines for science, which is pretty stringent, it's problematic, and we'll see that with the high school as well, which of course is here on its 200-acre site. Great to see the upgrades to the athletic fields that have been done. This building, of course, is probably starting to really feel its wear, because it's been in operation with so many students and faculty for so long. Enviable gymnasium complex that will never be seen again through MSBA. So something definitely to be proud of. And again, this is what we call those double loaded corridor classrooms, very efficient academic spaces. And some of this may or may not surprise you, but these were very efficiently designed classrooms, and so we do have some size issues here in terms of even classrooms, and there's a big issue in terms of academics, more than the core facilities. Some with, I know that we'll find, because of the enrollment that you have, the cafeteria has its challenges too. So that's kind of a snapshot of a trip down memory lane and where we are in terms of the existing facilities in town. And these are just some data points and graphics that help us as we kind of get our minds set for that options development. So as I mentioned, an enrollment projection report was done by a third party, and this is what we have been given to use for our analysis. It's the McKibben report. Many people may be familiar with that. We are using that for our projected numbers for 31 to 32. And then we will use that MSBA, what they call a space summary template for these spaces. And the modular classrooms will be excluded as viable space in this study. They have all lived more than a full life, and they did, honestly, some of them, we were saying that back when we did this study, and they've been well maintained. They may even make people feel falsely confident about them. No, I don't mean it like that. Of course, they're fine. They're fine educational spaces, and it's due to the efforts of capital improvements on them. But in terms of a long-term solution, they need to come out of the mix because they're not intended for that 50-year window, which is what is expected of major school projects. This is a somewhat complicated chart, but it is to indicate some of the data that we currently have, which is with the enrollment. So that's in the center column that you see. Red means it is under expectations currently. Blue means it's over. So that's interesting to take a look at. Pre-K, probably not surprising, is very, very under currently. Whereas Beale is in good shape, Coolidge is definitely under, and the other elementary level schools are marginally so. The middle school actually has some capacity at both of those schools, so they look fairly solid in that regard. And the high school, again, probably not surprisingly, is a big it's a change in terms of the number of students, but where you see, I'm sorry, the enrollment projections for the high school are going down in that 10-year period. So they're going down by that 86 that we're seeing. But what happens is when we look at the facility itself in terms of meeting contemporary educational needs, using that MSBA template, it is at a spatial deficit overall. So that's part of the analysis that we're doing as we look at the options. So in the square foot area, we have the current square footage without the modulars included. And so you'll see a big deficit at those schools that have modulars because that area that you're currently using will come out of the fold in terms of part of the option. And I misspoke on the middle school. The middle school enrollment is going down. It is showing that going down, and it's showing the elementary basically going up. And I apologize if I just, do you want me to restate all of that, Patrick? Would that be good?
Well, I think
Would you like to talk about this a little bit? That might be helpful.
one piece I would just point out is the the numbers as they're shown with the current enrollment 21-22, for example, at the high school at 1835. That school was designed for 1,475 students. So we're running way over capacity right now. And what this chart shows is, while yes, the enrollment is projected to go down in the next 10-year period by 86 students, that's still going to leave us about 300 students over what the school was designed for. So, we're going to be looking at through this study, the design capacity as well, not just the current enrollment. So I just wanted to point out that particular piece.
Exactly. Thank you.
May I ask a question?
Sure.
Do you mind if I ask a quick question? Can you just clarify the square footage? So I understand current, and then projected, you take out the modular. But is projected also the projected need based on the?
Oh, that's
projected
great.
number of-
Thank you for asking that question, because I can see how that might be confusing. So on the square footage, what we're showing for current is what is existing, but without the modulars included, because they won't be in that formula as we look at the options. Projected is what would be needed to meet the number of students at that level. So it is a little bit complicated. And that's an MSBA formula. You can take their formula and plug it into a template, and it tells you how much square footage you need. This may be a little bit more information than you need tonight, but we also add to that template number. And the reason is special education is historically underrepresented in the MSBA template, and so we use historical data to do that. Never had an MSBA job where we're able to do the SPED with the part that they have allotted. And the other piece is the school committee has voted a number of students per classroom at each grade level, and we have the ability to adjust the number of classrooms based on that. So it's pretty technical, but that square footage, so if you look at, let's look at Coolidge, it says it's 45,900 square feet now, but there's another several thousand square feet that's part of the modulars, but that's not showing there. Does that make sense?
Okay, but I think you said the current does include the modular. But
The
projected
current does
does
not in this
Does not,
table.
okay.
It's not there. So the modulars are out of that mix. So that's why, one reason you may, so if you look at, say, Floral Street, you say, okay, well, their enrollment's only going up by 2. It will, that's not a good example. The Spring Street's an excellent example. The enrollment is only expected to go up by 6, but the school is only half the size it needs to be. And that's because currently there are 6 modular classrooms at Spring Street, and there are other deficits within the building. So we'll take this to the next level, obviously, as we do the full analysis this summer, and we'll be using this data. We just wanted to kind of give you a quick snapshot on this now. The next steps, as Patrick mentioned, we are going to look at what's called the design capacity of each school. So we'll say, based on the data that I just talked to you about, Spring Street's capacity is X number of students, and that gives us a baseline that we can work from, and we can look at that. So we'll be doing that, and then we'll be assessing all of the priorities, again, with the working group. We will be looking at some potential sites for consideration outside of the existing school sites. We did that with Beal. We'll pick that up again and take another look at that, so we'll roll that in. And as I said, we'll make final recommendations through the working group in the fall. So I'm happy to take any questions if I can clarify anything.
Anybody have any questions? Did you have one, Ms. Gassman?
I'm fine. I'm okay.
Ms. Klein?
I had a question. I am just, if you could explain why the projected enrollment at the middle schools is expected to drop. I'm just curious about that, where, this would be in 10 years, like students that aren't in school yet, or children that aren't in school yet.
Might be better for you to respond to.
Sure. I can, as Katie mentioned, we engaged a demographer, Dr. Jerome McKibben, who did a 10-year enrollment forecast for us. And what he does is he looks at, in a very kind of detailed way, the demographics of the current population of Shrewsbury, and in particular, the females of childbearing age. And so that's what is one of the implicit forecasting factors in 10-year school enrollment projections. So part of the importance of this kind of capital planning project really drove us to seek an independent enrollment forecast for the next 10 years. We have two other sources of enrollment forecasts that we always look at. The one owned internal from the town manager's office, and then NESDEC, New England School and Development Education Council. Those two models, they're really more looking at historical trends, kind of looking backwards, and then projecting forward using a mathematical model, but they don't go into the depth of forecasting that this demographer did around looking at the particular population statistics that we have in Shrewsbury right now, and then basing upon other data about how many children are born per year and per childbearing females, and kind of all that kind of gets rolled into his forecast. So when you do that, that's what results in this 10-year forecast and shows that up to in 2031, 2032 timeframe, looking at these particular enrollment projections for those grade levels. So hopefully that answers your question.
Thank you.
Anybody from the school committee have any questions or comments?
Thank you very much, and thank you for having us. We'll start there, but on the specifics, and Patrick, I apologize, this may be for you, so we can share a mic for a minute, but I'm wondering, the report that you suggested we did of 25 years ago was a 20-year look ahead, but yet we're doing a 10-year look ahead now, and I'm wondering if that was based on, we had good demographic data for sort of 10 years, or if there was a reason we wanted to now, if things are changing so quickly about what MSBA is asking of us, why we're making a choice as a community to not do a 20-year look ahead. I'm surprised by some of the changes, and I think a lot of our community might be as well. We had such rapid growth, and then it seems like, oh, we're entering a bit of a different phase.
I could start, because that's an excellent nuance to this report, which also had 10-year projections. There's only so far out we can figure some of these things where it's really more of a guess. But the look ahead, the overall options ended out extending beyond, basically, kind of using that. And of course, it's a living document. It's something where we would, the sequence continued, but we had to look at what the enrollment demographics were at that moment when Beale or Sherwood or any of these other schools were developed. So it's updated. We looked at what the state was reimbursing for and so on. So it's kind of a major look at overall planning for it rather than too fine a spin on it. But you may want to add more.
And I would just kind of reemphasize what you just pointed out, is that, we want to take a sensible approach to this, and 10-year enrollment forecasts are still forecasts, and many things can change, and so we just thought it would be more sensible to take a look at it for the next 10-year period and see what that plan looked like for us, and not get too far ahead of ourselves, if you will, especially whereas we, I think it would be much more crystal ball involved in doing a 20-year enrollment forecast, and might not have kind of the same credibility, if you will. So we're looking at just a 10-year plan.
Mr. Chairman.
Anyone? Mr. Samia?
Just a quick question. In terms of the MSBA recommendation for sizes, how often do they look at that? Is there any risk that midstream, what is viewed as programs now?
Oh, how often do they change it?
Yeah, because we have this space deficit now, but how often do they look at that? Is that 10, 20 years, or every handful of years?
So they, MSBA was initiated in, I think, 2008. And there have been very few changes to that space summary template. There have been a few. They retracted on gymnasium sizes that they would allow. They have become a little bit more rigid about what they will reimburse. They're not excited about reimbursing for storage or administration. They're very excited about academics and special education. One thing that they changed recently was to integrate maker spaces into the template. So we're starting to see that, which is interesting. They have some progressive people on their Facilities Assessment Committee. So the quick answer is not frequently, and it's very carefully done. And it's pretty slow moving. It goes through a very long process before that can happen.
Okay, thank you. Now, it just gives one less variable to look at as you look
Correct,
at all these variables.
correct. It's a
Because that'd be
very
an
good
extreme wild
question.
card. Okay, thank you.
Anyone else?
Just have a comment.
Mr. Mizuka?
I just had a comment, but if you have a question.
I don't.
You okay. Thank you for this. I just want to speak a little bit to members of the community who might be watching and feeling like perhaps there's an MSBA application on the horizon, and that's not really the point of this. That the point of this is more to create a roadmap so that we update a plan that has been in existence, as you said, for over 25 years. As a community, it's important for us to care for the buildings that we have so that they do last for the full life of the building. But then we have a reputation for then replacing buildings when the time comes and doing it in a way that is extremely fiscally responsible. I think that we saw that with the Beal School project, which I think Mr. LeBeau said came in, what was it? How many millions of dollars under budget? And then also,
11.6.
how many was it?
11.6.
$11.6 million under budget. But then also, as you mentioned, with Sherwood, where we were able to really take advantage of a downturn in the market and get quite a value for our dollars, that it's important for us to do this work, not to alarm people, but because we have to have a plan going forward that the community is aware of, and that it's healthy for us to always be carrying some amount of debt in our debt service, because that's what you do if you want to maintain your infrastructure and your public buildings. So just wanted to make that point.
Great point. And I would bolster what you're saying by saying that MSBA really encourages this type of planning process. It's becoming very competitive to get into the program because there's only so many dollars, and they really favor communities that show excellent planning and can step up with a study that shows their thinking ahead. So it bodes well, and your point is well taken. It's a long road to get there. So that's an excellent point.
Right,
It's
and just
not
if
as though
I
it's
might,
happening
what you're saying, right, that we're ready. And I think that we have this reputation for being ready when the opportunity presents itself. We were ready to reach out to the MSBA and be part of that process for Sherwood. We were ready for Beal. You want to be ready when the time is right for the community. And, it takes something like, 5 years from the time you're accepted into the program for a school to actually open. And so you have to be doing this planning proactively.
Right. Great point.
Actually, I think Sherwood, we were beginning under the old program, and we had to stop.
You're absolutely right.
And then
Yeah,
we
it went on hiatus.
And we had to
and-
build under the new program, which actually turned out to be pretty good, even though we thought that whole construction manager at risk and having the owner's project manager was gonna be a bad thing. It turned out to be a good thing.
It did. It was good. And MSBA has a much more expeditious way of reimbursing communities for their projects than the previous administration did. So there are many, many positive things about the way MSBA administers a project. It differs from what we had
Just
before.
to follow up on what Ms. Cassavant was saying, what these projections are saying are what the needs are. They're not necessarily at this point saying if it needs to be a new school, a renovation. That doesn't happen until you actually get into the process, right?
Absolutely.
And that's a
Right.
requirement of looking at the existing building and seeing if it can be used or not used. And this is just saying, this is how much space we need to do the program properly.
Correct. But what we will be doing with this data this summer is, again, working with the team to look at priorities, just as this report was done. And we'll have a few sequential options that this should be the highest priority, and it would be this. Here's another option, and we'll have order of magnitude budgets associated with them. But your point is well taken. That's just a roadmap. Then you need to endorse one of those options, and when the time is right, when you go to MSBA, you have to work with them to determine whether it's new construction or ad reno, or what is the best approach. So it's all a very detailed process that gets you in the right direction.
Thank you. Any comments from you folks? Yes.
Sure. Just to piggyback on that a bit, I think the MSBA template probably different than when this was done originally in 1997. When I remember reading the report, I had just come into Shrewsbury at that time. That was the year I was hired, when the year Floral Street School opened. MSBA didn't exist, and I think these processes help in terms of targeting what is sort of best practice for an educational space. So I think it's a really helpful construct to use in terms of this planning. And certainly there could be, and will be at some point in the future, major school projects to renovate or replace schools in Shrewsbury, just as any public building over time that's going to happen. I think it's pretty obvious that, and we've known this for some time, that we have some really severe space constraints at Shrewsbury High School based on the way that the enrollment increased well beyond the original plan, and it's going to settle in several hundred students above according to these projections. And these student projections could change over time as well, and something we always have to pay attention to year over year. But beyond the big replacement renovation kind of projects, this planning document will also talk about important ways that we're going to need to maintain projects, whether that's a new roof for the high school at some point and what that timing would look like. That's going to be a very significant expense. There are projects like the Oak Window project that's coming up, where MSBA has a program for repairs for things like windows or boilers or roofs, I believe, as well. But in terms of the other things such as HVAC systems are very much on my mind, because not only is it about extending year-round, but we are coming to a point where we're experiencing warmer weather in the early fall and in the late spring, different than what we did 25 years ago. And it's frankly a working and a learning condition issue for us as well. And it's also an equity issue. We have about half of our schools now have climate control, some full air conditioning, some with some dehumidification, and others that don't have any at all, other than some core spaces. And that's something that we need. To me, that may not be anything the MSBA participates in, but there are a number of communities, because it is so competitive, who even are doing school projects now where they're not working with MSBA because the renovation is not going to qualify compared to some of the real desperate need buildings across the state have. There are a lot of communities that have really significant needs with really old schools that are probably going to trump where we are in terms of a pipeline. So those are all things that this plan is going to have to consider. And I really appreciate working again with LPA and working with Mr. Baldinger, Mr. Mizikar, certainly Patrick's understanding of having been here off and on for a quarter century and doing this work. I'm very confident the plan that will come forward in the fall will be very thoughtful about putting that roadmap together in terms of where we need to go and be thinking about to make sure that we don't end up in a bad situation. And that's, again, as was stated earlier, being ready when the time comes is going to be really important. So that's some perspective that I have.
Thank you. Ms. Crockett, that 97 study, was that, did Ted Coughlin head that one up?
I have on here Mr. Daniel Morgado, Mr. Richard Kearney, Dr. Anthony Bent, and Mr. Robert Cox.
Okay. I was involved with one of those studies, and I went to Coolidge School.
Oh.
And when I was in Coolidge School, we thought the room was so big, and there were 30 students in it, and there was a piano and a science table in my 5th grade class. And when I went back in there, when we were working through, I couldn't believe how small it was. So, what was adequate a lot of years ago isn't anymore.
Has changed a lot. It's so true. Yeah.
Yeah, it's really amazing when you go back, when you think you're doing what you do now, it looks great. 20 years from now, you realize that things have changed and you need a lot more room.
It's a continual evolution, which I guess is a good thing, but it's true.
Okay, anybody else have any questions or comments? No? Thank you.
Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Okay. And now we're going to talk about the next thing. Before we do that, Ms. Heffernan, I'd like to congratulate you on getting reelected.
Thank you.
And Ms. Boucher, getting elected. Hopefully, everybody's a little bit calmer now that the elections are over. People do not realize how stressful they are under any circumstances. So congratulations. We look forward to working with you.
Yeah, thank you. More rested, that's for sure, than a week ago.
Good.
Glad to be here.
So, do you want, do you want
Give a
to?
little overview?
Sure.
Sure. So, thank you, Mr. DiPaolo. So just a kind of a quick overview on some financial matters and touch just very lightly on the fiscal year 23 look ahead for the municipal side of operations. Of course, it's good to, have these conversations in compliance with the override framework that so many of us worked on and put together when we were going through the fiscal struggles in the winter of 2021. So with regards to how I see things shaping up for fiscal year 22, given the data for local receipts that I have through the end of April, I expect that they will perform very similar to fiscal year 21, which is very good news. It shows a very rapid recovery from the impacts of the pandemic that we experienced in fiscal year 20. And as of the end of April, we've collected 100% of the total receipts, which we expected for the entire fiscal year. And we're roughly 5% ahead of collections in comparison to where we were at the end of April of 2021. With regards to town operations generally, as everyone has heard throughout the course of the Finance Committee budget hearings, the budget as proposed uses the resources requested through the override to build staffing capacity within departments, and I believe the staffing increases will not be needed at this level for future budget cycles. We're still challenged as we look to build capacity and remain competitive with salaries and wages on the municipal side, just like almost every other organization, even outside of government, of course. It's still only a single pot of funding that we get, and we're capped by the internal structures and controls that were put in place by the Board of Selectmen and with the school committee. So trade-offs were certainly necessary. So as we're building that staffing capacity, I do have great concern about salary and wage increases and extreme inflationary times that we're in right now, and extremely competitive job market. So that will be a challenge for municipal operations, and I'm sure schools, in the coming fiscal year. The most significant operational challenge, again, will be that staff recruitment and retention, and similar to other folks. And we'll certainly be challenged on some of our smaller capital improvements, whether that's roadway improvements or other repairs because of inflation. We're certainly seeing fewer applicants for our open positions that we have, and we're struggling to compete on the wage side of things. I just also want to continue to recognize the space deficiency that we have at the town hall with regards to school administration and town operations. It's having an impact on kind of how we function, much more limited meeting space, conference room space. The challenges are operations. And as many folks are aware, the Board of Selectmen dedicated roughly $50,000 in American Rescue Plan Act funds to developing design concepts to renovate and potentially expand the town hall. And of course, the reason that we're using those dollars is because we don't have to go to the taxpayers to seek those funds and ask them for those additional funds. So we're trying to be as fiscally responsible as we can and overcome the operational challenges and put ourselves in a better place to provide the services that we need to. So we'll work closely with Dr. Sawyer and his leadership team regarding the programmatic needs of the school department as we go through these design concepts. We'll bring forward a number of viable alternatives and we'll all have a discussion about those when those are available in the near future. So looking forward to working through the final part of the fiscal year 23 budget development process with town meeting on May 21st. But again, fiscal year 22 is wrapping up rather nicely, and we look forward to making changes in 23 with town meeting's consent.
Great, thank you. Any questions from Ms. Scott? Okay.
Yeah. No, I thank you so very much, and I think one of the things is what a perfect evening really to put all this together. You talk about capital and you should talk about operating at the same time, because these two are two sides of the coin. I should note that I'm here with many of my colleagues this evening who you already acknowledged. Our Vice Chair, Mr. Palich, our Secretary, Mr. Wensky, couldn't be here tonight, but also members, Ms. Boucher and Ms. Fritz. We know that a few years ago, we were in the space where we were planning for a capital expenditure in Beal, which was so exciting, and yet we were struggling operationally to figure out how are we going to have the teachers to fill the building. So I really think it shows an immense amount of planning on the part of all of the people in this room to sort of say we should be talking about these things together and in tandem and frequently and regularly. So thank you for having us here for one of these events. Certainly, we will continue on the school side to thank the voters for the override that put us in such a different position. We're here to talk about the override stabilization fund and sort of how we are faring. But as somebody who watches closely what happens at the school department, recognizing my first two budget cycles and my third were wildly different experiences, and watching these gentlemen in particular spend an inordinate number of hours figuring out how to cut versus a pivot to where and how do we think about planning for the future. And it makes our job a lot easier, but that's not why the voters did it. The voters did it because it's what our community needed across the board. So certainly as we prepare, and we voted a few meetings ago on our budget that we'll be bringing to town meeting in a few weeks at a very high level. I know many of you are paying close attention, but for those who are maybe don't as regularly turn into our school committee meetings, I think a couple things that I will note, and then I'll turn it over to Dr. Sawyer. We have been paying obviously close attention to the impacts on COVID for our young people, and they are many and immense and not going away anytime soon. In particular, I think while looking at the academic learning loss is clearly of key import for us, you don't have to you can't get away from the news of what the mental health impacts are for young people in this day and age. And I think we have, as a school committee, done a first important step forward on that in terms of investments on staffing on mental health and really adding additional pieces to the budget. We had was it 2 weeks ago? It was last week. My goodness, the weeks are blurring together. A presentation of the biannual Youth Risk Behavior Survey. And the data, I want to share some of it because I think it's really important for folks to appreciate that this is not a New York Times story or a Boston Globe story that doesn't impact our kids. Our children in December of 2021, 17% of high schoolers acknowledged that they, when asked anonymously, that they had seriously considered suicide in the last 12 months. And that number was 14.6% at Oak. And so this issue is very prevalent for us and is alarming on a lot of levels, and is going to require all of us to figure out what to do. I would say a first piece is some more dedicated staff to help us here, but we know that there are things that we can put in place in terms of universal mental health screeners that was talked about just earlier tonight, and potentially some state funding to help with that issue. But once we screen a young person and they have a need, who's going to fill that need, and how will we make sure that student can still access the curriculum, and every teacher and every person, an adult in that building, knows how to appropriately respond. So both we have the response side, and we need to also build in protective factors for kids, right? And we need to make sure that they all can identify adults in the building that they care about, and they can engage in pro-social activities. We were excited as a committee to remove a fee, which is the first time we had done so in a very long time, and that was the activity fee at the middle school and high school. So you don't have to pay a fee to be in the chess club anymore, right? You don't have to pay a fee if you want to be in the drama program, because we know that's a really an important protective factor for kids. And so as we think about all these things, many young people in Shrewsbury, they identify their future plans and they are positive, right? And so we have lots of good things to celebrate here, but I think as a committee, there's a lot of important places for us to keep a very, very close eye on and to continue to look at our investments. So we look forward to bringing that to the back to town meeting, and as these two gentlemen can say, it was, you know, the first time ever that the superintendent's budget and the town manager's budget were exactly aligned because of the override and because of the work that we've done collectively to ensure that we're all kind of operating from the same playbook going forward. So with that, I can turn it over to Dr. Sawyer and Mr. Collins for some more details.
And I'll be very brief. I just want to thank again both the Board of Selectmen in tandem with the school committee for the work you did last year to put the override framework together, for the support of the Finance Committee as well, of course, and for the leadership Mr. Mizikar brought to this concept around being able to go to the community and say, if you make this investment, we will make it last a number of years. We made a commitment for 4 years that there would be caps on the amount of the budget we would have as a result. And given the amount of revenue available, that's a 4.75% increase. That is the recommended school department budget. There are a variety of additional, to not make any cuts or reductions is huge for us, to maintain and stabilize and not have some of the issues that go with staff being worried, newer staff being worried they might not have a job the next year depending on the outcome of some vote in the spring. Not having that kind of anxiety has been a huge plus for us, and we are investing a lot of time in trying to look and make things better with our leadership team as opposed to how do we mitigate reductions, which is we had to do that too often in previous years. To be a little more specific around some of the things that we plan to invest in, there are a few mandated types of service positions that we just need. We're going to restore a preschool teacher and a classroom aide we cut a couple of years ago because we have a larger census of kids with special needs coming up to the preschool program. Connecting it to the space study, we're actually going to be utilizing the new Beale School for a couple of preschool classrooms, essentially replicating what we used to do in the space behind the post office on Maple Ave and on Wesleyan, to be able to make that happen. With one of those, the new section plus one of the sections will move from Parker where we had cannibalized some space there. We'll add an English language education teacher. We continue to see some increases in a number of students who need that English language education, particularly that will be shared between Beale and Coolidge. A portion of a speech language pathologist position. An additional special education teacher at the high school is needed. We're adding that. And then 2 adjustment counselors at the high school, 1 at the Oak Middle School, 2 clinical coordinators who are board certified behavior analysts who help with more significant or even extreme student behaviors. And we've seen more of this post-pandemic, as has every school district in the nation. And that's something that's important for us. Also, for the first time, and I think we talked about this in one of the budget meetings, a social worker to help us with issues that are happening outside of school and connecting families to support and working with outside agencies to support students in a variety of ways. Rather than contracting out, we need more capacity and more direct work from a position like that. We're happy to be restoring 3 special subject teacher positions at the middle school level to restore some programming we previously had and add a little bit. We're going to replicate our design lab program that we have at Oak and started at Sherwood. We're also going to add back a drama teacher at Oak Middle School and a music teacher at Sherwood who will also help with the musical and play. We were able to run those at Sherwood in the last couple of years, first because of COVID, and then just we didn't have capacity, someone who was able to do it. And as Ms. Heffernan referenced, there are, the more we can provide kids things that they're engaged with in school in addition to their academics, the greater those protective factors around mental and behavioral health. So and then of course the amount of money also to provide access without asking families to pay extra for those kinds of activities. So we're very pleased and proud to present this budget to town meeting coming up soon. And again, I could not be more grateful that this override was supported by the community and that this framework is allowing us this kind of stability and predictability, which for any organization makes a big difference in terms of planning and in terms of being able to execute to our mission. So with that, Mr. Collins and I can answer any specific questions you might have about the budget or from a more of a broad perspective, Ms. Heffernan or members of the school committee.
Anyone? Questions, comments?
It's like a comment question. Just to confirm, we have successfully managed to stay within the agreement, in all regards. And I just think it's really important for the community to know that, that it did work exactly how we hoped that it would. And it's nice to see the result of all of the hard work and planning, both from, to the town manager and the Board of Selectmen, to you, Dr. Sawyer, and Mr. Collins, and the school committee, that it really did turn out the way we hoped that it would. And this is a really great place to be in, where we are able to make that commitment to the community, follow through on it, and provide financial stability for several years.
Yeah, and just a couple of things to add on that. Things have turned out with regards to the recovery with the pandemic a little quicker than or a little better than we thought they would. And that means that, our financial forecast, as we've talked about throughout the winter months and into the spring, is that, that initial 4-year total commitment is, easily we can achieve 5 from that. And that is reflected in the amount of money that we'll place into the override stabilization fund, which is nearly double what we thought it was going to be. So there's about $3.2 million that town meeting placed into the override stabilization fund last May. And we're proposing an additional $3 million for this coming town meeting on May 21st. So that is the stabilizing factor for the financial model that we're working through. So eventually it is planned that we will begin to draw down on that and we'll look at those years really closely and only do that when we needed. But we're definitely within or ahead of the parameters that we set for ourselves as far as how we're going to spend funds.
Great. Thank you. Anyone else? Anybody from the school committee? Sawyer, Mr. Collins? Once, twice? Okay. Well, thank you for coming in. Good to see all of you.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Thanks for
Thank
having
you.
us.
Okay. Next, we have a couple of meetings regarding all alcohol licenses. Before we do that, I just want to take a minute to remind all 3 applicants about the obligations that are intended or that accompany getting a one-day license. Just to make you aware, not because there's been any problems, but a one-day alcohol license is all the requirements that have to be met are the same as a full 1-year license. You probably are aware, but I'm just going to take a minute to review a couple of things. Your servers have to be tip certified. You can't overserve, and if somebody gets stopped leaving an event, the police will trace back where they last were served, and it could cause problems for you. Obviously, you can't serve minors. I know you're aware of that, but and there's a zero tolerance for infractions with these licenses. So they're very helpful to organizations when they are having events, but there's also a tremendous obligation with it. And there is in the package that you get the rules that you need to be aware of, but just wanted to take a minute to just go over it and review it again so that you're aware, because I think all of you folks are new to the process. So we just wanted to take a minute to make you aware. So having said that, we'll move on to our next order of business, which is a meeting with Leonardo Patricio St. Mary's Syrian Orthodox Church, 1 Industrial Drive, to review and act on a one-day alcohol license request for a birthday party on May 13th from 7:30 PM to 12 AM. Would you like to come forward? You won't need to do this on our usual one-day licenses as we go forward.
Oh, okay.
But because it's the first time, that's why we asked you gentlemen to come in.
Okay.
So if you want to, you could sit, or I could stand there. It's up to you.
I can-
So this is just a continuation of what you folks have been doing, right? You have the infrastructure in place. You know, your organization knows what needs to be done.
Yeah.
Okay. Does anybody have any questions or comments? No?
You covered it.
So, if there aren't any, did you want to add anything, sir?
No, I'm good.
Okay. Could I have a motion on this application?
Move approval.
Second.
Okay. We have a motion and a second. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? So voted.
Thank you.
All set. Long time to wait for 3 minutes, but. Okay. The next order of business is a meeting with Rob Atchison, Century West Mazda, 940 Boston Turnpike, to review and act on a one-day beer and wine license request for the grand reopening event on May 17th from 4 PM to 7 PM. Are you here, sir? Would you like to just?
How you doing?
So it's, obviously, it's a one-off event. You're only going to have a grand reopening once. Anything you'd like to tell us about it?
No, it's just a grand reopening. We just finished a remodel, and we have some executives coming in from, we're a Mazda franchise, so we have some executives coming in from Mazda to see it and celebrate the opening with us. So it's only 3 hours. It's next Tuesday. Quick, easy. We're just hoping to serve some beer and wine.
Okay, great. Okay. Anyone have any questions? No? Could I have a motion then?
Move we approve the one-day beer and wine license request for a grand reopening event on May 17th, 2022, from 4 o'clock PM to 7 o'clock PM for Rob Atchison, Century West Mazda, 940 Boston Turnpike.
Second.
Second. We have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? There being none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? So voted.
Awesome.
Congratulations.
Thank you, guys.
Congratulations.
Okay, our next order of business is a meeting with Felipe Lemieux, St. Mary's Parish, 20 Summer Street, to review and act on a one-day, it's actually a beer and wine license request, correct? For a Taste of the Nations event on June 11th from 5 PM to 8 PM. Good evening. Is there anything you'd like to add, or?
Yeah, no, it's great. This is actually our third year doing it. We haven't had it in the last couple of years. So
Yeah.
it's a community event, we call it Taste of Nations. So it'll be food, but also beer and wine, hopefully from around the world. So
Okay. Anybody have any questions? No? There being none?
I move that the Board of Selectmen approve the one-day beer and wine license requested by Philip Lemieux of St. Mary's Parish for the Taste of the Nations event on June 11th, 2022, from 5 PM to 8 PM.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Is there any further discussion? There being none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? So voted. There you go.
thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, our next order of business is to review and act on the preliminary plan for 1 through 7 Maple Avenue, the Beal redevelopment from Civico Greenlee. Mr. Mizikar, do we have anything that we're going to present to?
I'd like to talk about it a little bit. if
Sure.
you wouldn't mind. So, as the board is aware, we have undertaken, the board executed a land disposition agreement with Civico Greenlee for the redevelopment of 1 through 7 Maple Avenue. And over the course of the development of that land disposition agreement, we settled on 8 primary terms that the board needed to see in a preliminary site plan in order to move forward. So this is really the first step moving forward with the LDA, where a preliminary site plan has been presented It's been reviewed by staff to ensure compliance with the land disposition agreement. There was actually a preliminary plan submitted before this one, but it did not meet the criteria from the staff level, so we sent it back. And now we are comfortable with these plans. So this is a very, it looks sophisticated, but it's a very early design. It does meet those criteria, including parking requirements, maximum number of units, minimum number of ground floor retail, preservation of the World War I memorial, and things like that. So we would recommend that the board approve this preliminary site plan, which would authorize the developer to move on to the formal permitting and site plan review process, et cetera, special permit process with the planning board and other entities that would require oversight like Mass DOT.
Okay, does anybody have any questions on this?
I said one.
Yeah, sure. Please.
I know that I ask this every time, but I just wanted to confirm that none of the finishes or details or the material, like that's all still the same.
It's all still the same, right? And that's one of the things we did confirm. We do have elevations that were submitted along with the site plan, and they have maintained those. And of course, as we talk about during times like this, this is the town center overlay district, and it has the highest level of design oversight in any zoning district in the community. And that was purposeful when we were going through the initial aspects of the town center revitalization, is that we wanted the planning board to have that type of authority, which is rare. So those will be in place throughout. But yep, design quality has been maintained as committed to by the developer.
Great, thank you.
Okay. So just to recap, this is essentially what we had agreed to, what we expected at this point.
Correct.
And now if the board agrees to move ahead this evening, then Civico will move ahead with more definitive plans so that they can go to the next step, which is really going to be the permitting process.
Right.
Correct?
Yeah.
Okay. Which is a public hearing process.
It is.
That
Yeah, so that, yeah, beyond this point, it's really what folks would traditionally see a developer do. They'll do more due diligence on the site once they're granted access, and they'll begin to develop real fully engineered plans and design options, and hear the requirements of the planning board and what their expectations will be, and respond to the planning board and work with them over a series of public meetings and hearings over the summer months, hopefully.
Anybody, questions, comments? No? Okay, then we have a suggested motion, which is I move the board accept the preliminary plans for 1 to 7 Maple Avenue, BL redevelopment from Civico Greenlee dated April 28th, 2022, which will enable the developer to move forward in the process laid out in the land disposition agreement. So if somebody agrees with that motion, if you could make it, and second.
So moved.
Discussion.
Second.
Okay, you have a motion and second. Is there any further discussion? Okay, there being none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? So voted. Okay, so we're on to the next step. Item 13 is to review the annual town meeting warrant and act on recommendations related thereto, which I believe is really what we didn't cover, which were the zoning articles, correct?
That's correct.
So 30, let's see, Articles 30 to 36. We can take them one at a time if you want. Or, you know, why don't we just, how do you want to do this? We can do them one at a time, or we can do all of them. We could just,
Why don't we try to do all of them, because we've been through them all. We were just
Right.
waiting for the recommendation from the planning board, and I believe they're all, because I watched the meeting, that they all were approved.
right,
So unless someone has an issue,
no,
why don't we try to
do them all at once.
do them all at
Okay.
once? Yeah, I would.
So I'll just,
30 through 30.
just quickly summarize. Article 30 is, relates to continuation of an existing non-conforming use. Item 31 is intended to give oversight of the planning board on slopes of a certain design. Item 32 is the town clerk being allowed to make numbering changes if there are errors in the numbering when the bylaws are amended. Article 33 regards common driveways. Article 34 relates to screening in the limited industrial zones. Item 35 is related to allowing loading docks in the front of the buildings, and it changes the building heights that are allowed in the limited industrial. And there's one more, right? No, that's it. Okay. All right, so if there's no questions, somebody would like to make a motion on all of those, we can do that.
I move that we recommend Articles 30 through 35 for the annual town meeting warrant.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? There being none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? So voted. Item 14 is to review and act on the appointment of Mario Martellata, 24 Francis Garden Court, Apartment 77, to the Shrewsbury Housing Authority Board for a 5-year term to expire on March 31st, 2027, pursuant to MGL Chapter 121B, Section 5. This is something new to us. We haven't had to do this. Basically, the law changed and requires that the town actually appoint somebody who's a resident or a designee, but believe it's a resident, to sit on the board of the Housing Authority. And where the law is written, the Board of Selectmen is designated and authorized to, or directed to vote on who that person is going to be. There's a process where the Housing Authority notices the residents if they're interested in applying. When they get those applications, they forward them to the board, and the board then would make a decision on who it would like to appoint. In this instance, Mr. Martellata is the only person who submitted an application for the position. So I think I got that basically without going into all the minutia of it. But that's where we are.
And I think also, right, according to the statute, that we have to appoint, even if it's only one person that applies, like, we have to appoint them.
We still have to vote it. Yeah.
Right, but I mean, it's not like we can be like, oh, we want more people to apply, like, this
No,
is kind of what we have to do.
we have to act on what
Whatever
is
we get.
given to us. We don't actually do the solicitation, it's through the Housing Authority. So, having said that, is there any other questions or discussions on that? If there's not, would somebody like to make a motion?
Sure, Mr. Chairman, I make a motion that we appoint Mario Martellata, 24 Francis Garden Court, Apartment 77, to the Shrewsbury Housing Authority Board for a 5-year term to expire on March 31st, 2027, pursuant to MGL Chapter 121B, Section 5.
Second.
Second. Okay, we have a motion and a second. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? So voted. Okay, next order of business is to review and discuss the development of a public comment policy for open meetings of the Board of Selectmen. Ms. Cassavant, you had requested that this be on the agenda, so
Thank you.
if you would.
Thank you. Yeah,
Yes,
no, I'm
someone
happy
would
to
like
speak
to
to it. No,
bring it to the board?
absolutely. So this is something that I had asked to have placed on the agenda for consideration by board members to develop a public comment policy for open meetings that don't involve a public hearing. I know it's something that the school committee has a policy on, and I know that also other boards of selectmen and select boards have this policy. I also serve on the Framingham State University Board of Trustees. We have a similar policy on that board for public comment at meetings. I think that it needs to be, well regulated. Like, we need to have a policy around it, just to make sure that we do have some boundaries. But I would really appreciate if the staff in the Board of Selectmen and Town Manager's office could sort of work up something that we could react to either at our next meeting or the meeting after. I did do some digging around and thought that Sterling and Avon had some interesting policies, and they were a good model and maybe a place to start. And I'd be happy to support whoever is working on that, creating that policy draft, if it's something that the rest of the board agrees they'd like to move forward with.
Okay. Anybody else have any thoughts on this?
Mashpee's good, too.
Oh, I had that on my list.
I don't have any for a list, but I think it's a fantastic idea. And I think that, not to put words in your mouth, but when we talk about having boundaries, I think that we're just trying to make sure that the order of business can still proceed even when we allow.
Like, it can't go on for 2 hours.
Exactly. So not to squash what anyone might
No.
want to say, but just to make sure that we can still hold the meeting and adhere to the agenda.
Yeah, thanks for clarifying that, because, I mean, we're on the 2-hour mark of this meeting, and there was no public comment, so I think it's just important to balance.
I think our new chair will make sure that we don't have meetings this long.
Okay, so I don't think we need a vote at this point. Mr. Manager, could we ask your office to do some of the research on what's out there so that we can have a chance to look at it? And Ms. Cassavant, if you want to work with the staff, fine. And when the stuff is ready, we'll to look at, we'll bring it forward, discuss what we would like to do.
Great.
I just want to say, I agree with you that there's got to be guardrails. And I think that the devil will be in the details, but let's see what everybody else does.
Thanks.
Great, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. Okay. So the only other thing we have right now is correspondence, correct? Item 16 is an email dated May 2nd from Chief Bona regarding the installation of officers, and he will be installed as the president on May 18th, as Mr. Mizikar said. If anybody would like to attend, we're all welcome. Item 17 is a letter received May 3rd from Mary Claire Rigby, Lead Vegetation Strategy Specialist of Natural Grid, excuse me, regarding their vegetation management plan. Basically, it's a notice that that they will make follow-up treatments on their work if needed. So noted. Item 18 is a letter received May 4th from Stephen Trotto, 41 North Street, regarding the Affordable Housing Trust and his regrets that he has to resign from the trust. So it's unfortunate. I think he would have been a valuable member, but he just can't do it right now. Thank him for his willingness to serve, and as he said in the letter, if there are opportunities in the future, he'd like to be considered. I think the next thing to do is to advertise again for that position, that opening, so that we can get the Housing Trust back up to full strength. Right, we're getting to the point where we're actually starting to gear up and start to move forward, so it's important that we get somebody on there quickly if possible. Item 19 is a letter dated May 4th from Jennifer Maddox, Undersecretary, Dhcd, regarding the Housing Choice Community Designation, which Mr. Mizikar had already explained to us. So noted. Item 20 is a letter received May 5th from Angela Snell, Memorial Day Parade Committee, regarding the 2022 Memorial Day Parade, as Mrs. Cassavant had explained. So noted. Item 21 is a letter received May 5th from Nick Rapetka, Highway Division Manager, regarding the street sweeping report. And he reported that street sweeping has been completed after 7.5 weeks, and they picked up 320 tons of debris, so quite an undertaking. And item 22, 23, and 24 is ZBA decisions from April 25th, 2022. Bhavani Janapathy and Enzio DeJoyer and Ian Hill. So noted. Does anybody have anything else to come before the board in open session? Then I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
Your motion is second. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Thank you. We are adjourned. Ms. Conlon, you made it through your first one. There you go.
Thank you.
Okay.